Welcome back to Network Africa. The fall in commodities value is heightening the challenges of policymaking among central banks in Africa. The question is, how will the call for new ideas address the obstacles to these regulations? Our channel's business editor, Bosun Omofaye, had a chat with the governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, Patrick Njoroge.
When you look around the world and Africa, you find the central banks are always struggling to meet different challenges, and the last few years have been particularly tough. So how tough really is your job of being a central bank governor?
You're right. There has been a lot of shocks to our economies in Africa, and a lot of these have been externally driven, so external shocks. And the first line of defense for these external shocks generally involves the central bank. And this is why our work, our work has been a lot more challenging in these more troubling times. 2014 was a rather, actually 2015 was a very volatile year in the global markets. If you just look at the various indicators, you'll see that it was unprecedented in terms of the volatility. 2016 definitely beat 2015. And now 2017 has already started at a roar. So we are in rather tough neighborhood in terms of volatility. So that's one thing, and therefore we have to deal with that in terms of, for instance, exchange rate policies, in terms of having adequate reserves, external reserves to protect the economy appropriately, and also other things from, say, the domestic side. So, as you know, our countries also have been hit by some domestic shocks. Maybe some of them are poor policies, but also other things in terms of internal shocks. For instance, now in Kenya and surrounding countries, we've been hit by this drought. And that is obviously significant. It has impact on inflation. It has also impact on growth. So these are all things that we have to deal with. We are not the only arm, or you say that is that is involved in this. So we have to coordinate with other sort of policy arms, fiscal in particular, the fiscal authorities. So I think it is an interesting time. Of course, there is also added on top of this, you have the financial sector, stability of that, and strengthening the stability, strengthening the financial sector in various ways. Yes, it's a busy time, but these are interesting challenges to deal with.
If you look at the last 1, 2, 3 years and the challenges you've explained, what new thinking are you bringing on board to manage the external shocks with domestic volatility issues, whether it's in commodity prices or the need to approach international finance institutions, weakness in consumer demand? How are you balancing this with a new thinking? So look, there's a new direction for central bank governors in Africa. We need to move on from what we know to what we don't know, perhaps.
I think first and foremost, we shouldn't be worried about the shocks. Meaning these are challenges. I mean, this is why we are central bank governors. We cannot shrink at the task. It may be monumentous, but we have to face it. I think that's the first point I would want to make. And I think I've seen a lot of courage by my peers, my colleagues, governors. The other area is cooperation. One of the big things here is just working with other central banks around the country and indeed around the world. And I think these times call for even more cooperation, and I think we are getting that. That is one of the things that really surprised me. I didn't expect to see how deep this cooperation was. And I was positively surprised upon being appointed as governor, when I saw the depth of this cooperation with other central bank governors. I can pick up the phone and talk to my colleague in Tanzania. I can pick up the phone and talk to my colleague in Zambia. And it isn't just about policies, about everything else. Compare notes, at times have a joint policy on something. So I think it is something that that we have learned standing together. We are stronger than each one of us separately. The other point I think which is quite clear about the governors or to the governors is that we need to pursue strong economic policies. So there are no shortcuts. I have given this example to journalists before. We know how gravity works. And if I drop my book, it's going to fall. And there's a certain, let's say, impossibility to avoid that. And the same thing applies in economics. You cannot take shortcuts. When governments try to take certain shortcuts, it may appear to work for a limited period of time, but you know the outcome is in a sense inevitable. So there's that sort of, let's say, appreciation that we have to pursue what we believe are positive policies. But I think finally, which is an important element, is communication. Governors now around the world, and indeed central banks, are much more, now understand that we need to communicate a lot more to the population, to others. So we cannot, the old sort of world where if you thought, as Greenspan was quoted as saying, if you think you understand what I said, then you probably didn't understand me. You know, kind of trying to say that, you know, my job is not to communicate to you. No, that is long gone. It is important in terms of strengthening our policies to actually communicate, and communicate in words and phrases that most people will understand. And that way I think it helps make our policies more effective. So those are the sort of general directions I would say is the new thinking of central bankers as we have them.
Look at your colleagues, for example, in Egypt, in Nigeria, battling serious issues with exchange rates, devaluation, and what have you. What do you think?
I think they are doing they are fighting a rather, let's say, valiant fight, and fighting strongly. Obviously, they are coming from a position of, let's say, not having enough resources, reserves, and so forth. So their policy options are really limited. That's the point I think we need to appreciate better. So some of the policies they put out there are probably not favorable to the economy in the long run, but that's given the other sets of policies that were, the sets of policies that were absent, and the other options that were worse than that. That's what they came up with.
The governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, Patrick Njoroge, talking about the challenges of policy making among central banks in Africa. And that's it on Network Africa. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Temitope Fagbemi.